In this video, I will be performing two pieces from the Bohème manuscript that were written by Italian composers. The first piece is a Fantasia by Girolamo Frescobaldi. The second piece is a Passacaglia, very probably composed by Luigi Rossi, and I'll explain later why there is a little uncertainty about that. I have mentioned in previous videos that the Bohème manuscript, which now belongs to the Bibliothèque Nationale Library in Paris, is best known as one of the main sources of Louis Couperin's music. However, I think that if I were to describe its contents more accurately, I would say that it offers us an invaluable insight into the rich variety of harpsichord repertory that must have circulated in Paris around the middle of the 17th century. This repertory, in addition to Louis Couperin and other French composers, also included composers from other countries. Frescobaldi never actually visited Paris. His only sojourn outside Italy was an extended stay in Flanders. However, as his inclusion in the Bohème manuscript attests, his influence extended beyond Italy and certainly also extended beyond his lifetime. Even Johann Sebastian Bach studied Frescobaldi's music, copying by hand Frescobaldi's collection Fiori Musicali for his own use. A fantasia can denote more than one type of genre. In the case of Frescobaldi's Fantasia, we have a polyphonic composition based on imitative counterpoint and built around a particular theme or subject. The subject here is certainly very distinctive and contains both diatonicism and a delicious chromatic inflection. The first three notes form a first inversion E major chord, although as you'll find out if you keep listening to the piece, E major is the dominant rather than the tonic. The actual key of the piece is A minor-ish. And I say minor-ish because really at this time, composers are not really thinking yet in terms of tonality the way we do. So I think to call this piece A minor really takes away from the slight ambiguity between A minor and A major that exists within this piece. Now let me show you how this subject works. We have, it sounds like this. I will play the subject as it appears the first time. And as I said before, the first three notes actually form a first inversion E major chord before we have this chromatic inflection that takes us back to the same note we started from. So we start on B, and we end there. And as this is, as I mentioned, a polyphonic composition that's imitative, right at that point we have the entrance of the second voice with the subject. So it would go etc., etc. The Fantasia has three sections, all based on this same subject, but slightly transformed, not just in terms of pitches, but also in terms of rhythm, so that each section has a distinctive rhythmic identity. The third section especially is in triple meter, in contrast to the quadruple meter of the first two sections. So I can show you what those three appearances of the subject sound like. As I've already played the first one, this is the very first appearance that we have. The second section, and I played with the left hand because it doesn't enter in the highest voice, sounds like this. so a little faster. And then finally, when we get to the third section, which is in triple meter, it has an even faster feel. So it's this one. And at least this one ends on A, so this gives us perhaps a little better sense of the overall tonality of the piece. Finally, I want to mention that this piece was never published by Frescobaldi, and as far as I know, the Boin manuscript is the only source that preserves it. The second piece is a Passacaglia whose composer is only identified as Seigneur Luigi. It is very likely the composer is Luigi Rossi, who spent time in Paris between 1646 and 1648 and had his opera Orfeo premiered there in 1647. Passacaglia normally consists of a repeated bass pattern, above which we have a series of variations. The pattern Rossi has chosen for this Passacaglia is a descending minor tetrachord, which can sound like this. And I start on A as that's where the tetrachord in Rossi's Passacaglia starts, since this piece is in A minor, and I would say here the sense of tonality, at least being in A minor, rather than both A minor and A major, is much stronger. So I think we can call this piece A minor. Now, this descending tetrachord was a familiar trope that was used to symbolize sadness or despair, and it is found in many well-known pieces of that time. Perhaps its most famous occurrence is as the opening melodic motive of Dolen's Flow My Tears. Rossi is certainly not the only composer to have used it as a repeating bass pattern. Other examples include Monteverdi's Lamento della Ninfa from his 8th book of madrigals, and Dido's aria When I'm Laid in Earth from Purcell's Dido and Aeneas, although Purcell uses all the available pitches within the tetrachord so that we get a fully chromatic tetrachord. And now, normally the Purcell is played in G minor, but I will do it in A just so you hear it in the same tonality that I played the Rossi. So if you think about the Purcell, and then of course adds a little. But what happens is we still have this tetrachord. It's just chromatic. But it's basically the same idea. It's also interesting that this repeated bass pattern, this descending tetrachord, is actually used in another piece that's also included in the Boin manuscript, which is Louis Couprin's Passacaglia in G minor. Now, what I find particularly appealing in Rossi's Passacaglia is that he constantly varies and transforms this tetrachord. And in this way, the piece never sounds static and instead seems to always explore new territories. So already from the beginning, if I were to play to you the very beginning of the piece, we get this tetrachord already kind of semi-ornamented, shall we say. So, and I'll play it a little more slowly right now. The piece starts like this. So we have a few more notes. We have just a few more notes there, but basically it's the same thing. Now, what is very interesting is, of course, in a couple of statements, we are going to get something that's a lot closer to the real tetrachord. And I'm playing all of these without adding all the ornaments right now so that you can hear them a little better. So very soon after we hear this opening, slightly more florid statement of the subject, then we get it a little more plain and a little more recognizable, shall we say. So it sounds like this. Now, other things that you will find here is that there are a couple of brief moments where Rossi is going to venture very, very briefly, perhaps more accurately, I should say, he's momentarily going to cadence in the relative key of C major, but like in the Purcell example that I mentioned, he also explores this idea of using this tetrachord in a fully chromatic way. So if we go later in the piece, we get something like this. And here you will see that now I'm using the entire chromatic range of this tetrachord. So and of course now we expect, this is why I find this piece so fascinating, then we get the A, but instead of actually getting an A minor chord, in other words, it's almost as if what we're doing in the right hand has to go through 2 cycles of the tetrachord pattern in the left hand to complete itself. So things are not entirely in sync, shall we say here. So this piece is always full of surprises and we never really know what's going to happen next. And I have tried to incorporate this element of surprise also in my performance, in how I play the piece. As always, thank you for watching and I hope you enjoy the performances.